how were you able to take your Army training for all intents and purposes and overlay that and
Hmm.
make those adjustments throughout? Is it just the way you kind of integrated yourself in the team, or what do you think lent to you being able to do that?
I had to be open to listen. It was probably the biggest thing is and
Yeah.
to recognize that the way that I did in I came into it with a very open mind. Um, and before I even really started to get into it, I started to look at just on my own. I was like, okay, well, what are the differences here going to be? What are the key differences going to be? Both tactically and medically. And the biggest thing that like jumped out at me is you're never, because of aerial medevac assets, you're really never going to be farther away from than maybe 30 minutes from some level of trauma center, right? And for that reason, there was in the early days, and I saw this kind of right as I was getting into to tactical medicine. And a great example is that individual who said that he didn't let his officers carry tourniquets, and he's like, "Oh, I don't want, that's they shouldn't be carrying tourniquets." Well, I looked at it totally different. I'm like, okay, if we know that a tourniquet can stay on for 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours, and if nobody's ever farther away from a trauma center than 30 minutes, everybody should get a tourniquet.
Yeah,
Just do it. Just put a tourniquet on every extremity, and you're going to be okay with that, right? You're going to largely have good outcomes with that.
right.
Um, and I was fortunate at the time. I worked for a company that wanted me to go to a lot of these meetings and conventions. So that's when I started going to TECC and started seeing what they were stressing policy wise. I had guys like Dr. Josh Bobko, Dr. Reed Smith, who would get up and give presentations and saying, "Hey, this is what the injury patterns are in mass shooting scenarios and in what law enforcement officers are going to see." And they're not, it's the injury patterns aren't the same as what we saw overseas. So I had to adjust what I was emphasizing in training, based on that. But you always have to recognize if you if you have a if you know what you don't know, I think you're largely going to be successful. And I knew that there
Right.
was a lot that I didn't know. And I looked for mentors early on, guys like Jim Vredes, who runs the Center for Tactical Medicine here in
Mm-hmm.
Texas, uh, who taught me, he's a guy who's never been in the military, and he's basically everything that he knows about tactical medicine, he's had to seek out that knowledge on his own, but he had an invaluable amount of knowledge when it comes to how that applies in a law enforcement scenario. And those were the guys that I turned to ask questions of, to kind of figure this whole thing out. Because somebody who comes out of the military and says, "Okay, well, this is how we did it. This is how TCCC does it. So this is just how we're going to do it." They're going to
Yeah.
Right.
fail. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
gonna fail. So you have to be open to the environment, the personnel, the budget, the equipment, and all these other, confounding variables that are going to make things different.
100%. When we were, that was some of the things, the hurdles that we encountered was these individuals were coming out of the military. And like you mentioned, an example, they were used to having training cycles. And we don't have those,
No.
and they wanted to commit our people and assets to doing certain things that just weren't feasible because we had lack of training. It wasn't
Hmm.
going to be possible. So it was, one of those things that like I said, it took a little bit of a learning curve to get them to where we needed to be. But I think a lot of it was they had these individuals had bigger egos and they thought they knew a lot more stuff because they had great careers in the military, but it didn't directly translate, and they didn't realize that.